Hello, and welcome back to plantcare.club, where we care about your plants. My name is Fred,
My name's Maddie.
and on this show, we like to do three things. Number one, we talk about your plants, indoor, outdoor, whatever you've got, we'll talk about them as long as they're real, not fake. Number two, we'll do product reviews, so we'll talk about certain types of plants that are coming to the market, soil, different pots, fertilizers, all that kind of stuff. If you have something you're looking at buying and saying, hey, can you do some research into this? Let us know. We can help you out. And number three, we answer your questions. So if you have any questions while listening to the show, head over to plantcare.club, fill out the question form, and we can either get back to you over email or answer it on a following show. So you might be thinking, why are you guys talking about plants? What do you have to do with plants? Well, Maddie, where are you from?
Yeah, so Fred and I are actually brother and sister. We grew up on a greenhouse farm. Shout out to our parents. We watched this greenhouse grow since we were kids. And Fred is going to tell you more about how he's like directly related in the industry, but as growing up on the farm, there's always been an interest there. So I'm kind of acting as the consumer. I'm not a green thumb. You can ask my brother. I am killing plants all the time. So I'm kind of acting as you, where I get to ask Fred and ask him the questions as he's diving into these topics and kind of bring it back to, okay, why does this matter to me and what do these things mean? So that's kind of my job here. Go ahead.
Yeah, so at the greenhouse, I've been there about 6 years. We grow spring annuals, everything from little 4-inch pots up to 19-inch planters. We do garden mums and poinsettias. We also do some tropicals. So we'll do Majesty palms, Kimberly Queen ferns, Mandevilla, all of that kind of stuff. And we ship our plants across Canada and the United States. So the point of the show is to take all of that knowledge and experience that we have in the greenhouse and explain to you how we can apply that to our plants at home. Hopefully, Maddie can catch some of the questions as we're going through this and say, hey, slow down, like explain this a little bit better. But if she doesn't, if you have a question that she doesn't bring up, send it to us and we can probably get back to you. Today's topic, what we want to talk about today, is something that we get asked about pretty often. It has to do with plant diseases. So what are the most common diseases? I get asked, or I'll be sent a picture, we're sent pictures, and it's like, hey, what's wrong with my plant? And usually you can look at it and think, I can look and say, okay, I think that it's one of these two or these three diseases. You want to check a few of the leaves. So what we wanted to do today is start as a broad brush and give you some background on the top 5 plant diseases that are out there that you'll probably find in your houseplants and explain to you exactly what they look like, how to attack them, how we treat them in the greenhouse, why they occur, all that kind of stuff, all that good stuff. So if you are only listening to this, I'm going to do my very best to explain what it looks like, but it might be hard. And that's because we got pictures. There are pictures in the background. So for example, we're going to start out with root rot.
And I'm just going to note that if you're listening to this and you do want to see these photos, you can check it out on YouTube. We've got all these photos and this whole video on YouTube as well.
Yeah, check it out there. So above my head, you have good roots and bad roots. So you can see the difference here.
Mm-hmm.
The good roots are white. The bad roots are kind of black. Now over to my right here, you can see how the roots are down at the bottom of the pot. They're spiraling at the bottom of the pot, which is what we like to see, but now they've gone brown. And that's not a good sign. You also want to see roots, if they're white roots and they have little fuzzes on the side of them, that's a good sign. So you want, that's the style of root that you really want to see. Now there are going to be some exceptions, like, for example, let's say alocasia. That's a plant that it doesn't have roots the same way where they're these small, thin, fragile roots. It's going to have large, thick roots. So this applies to a ton of different types of plants, but there are still going to be edge cases where it might apply, it might not apply.
Okay, so we're talking like geraniums, pansies. Those are the kinds of plants we're going to see something like this if we take the pot off.
Yeah,
Okay.
poinsettias, but a ton of houseplants too. Like a lot of houseplants are going to have the exact same fundamentals. The root system just is going to look different.
Okay.
So I think what you're seeing here, these look like calathea, the root systems. So, it applies to them. Anyway, let's start with the top. So, what does the image look like? As I mentioned, roots are brown versus white. Brown you definitely don't want to see. Why does it happen? Consistent wet soil. So that's when you get root rot. Roots like to breathe, just like people like to breathe. So when you have roots that don't have the ability to grab air, that's when you have this problem. Any pot that you buy from a grower is going to have holes in the bottom of it, and that's because they want the water to drain out. When you bring it home, having holes and having the water drain all over your floor is very inconvenient. So you want to put that cover over top. So we totally understand why you have the cover over it. Like poinsettias, it's very common when you buy a poinsettia from the store, it's going to have that foil cover or maybe a plastic cover, something like that, which is totally fine. But during the day, I'd suggest take that cover off, let the roots breathe because they need air just as much. They need to have that, flow of oxygen getting through. That's really what um, helps that plant continue on and stay away from this kind of a disease.
Okay, so basically overwatering, and it'll be sitting in the water.
Yep.
Plant doesn't like its feet wet. That's what you're gonna hear Fred say that a lot, but
Yeah, you
plants
read
don't
my
like their
mind.
feet wet. Yeah.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah, the plants don't want wet feet. Okay, so how is it treated in the greenhouse? You dry out the soil in a fungicide. So generally, if if the roots are like above my head over here, where they're very black, that might be too far to come back from. That's when you see the plant have really bad problems. You can apply a fungicide, and the fungicide is going to get down there, get rid of some of that bacteria. It's going to neutralize the soil, and hopefully it can start to help your plant out. But it's kind of like turning a ship where if you do something 1 week, 2 weeks later, you're going to see the response from the plant. So it's not like you can just apply a fungicide and then right away and dry the soil out and right away it's just going to be great. It's going to take a long time for that whole thing to really turn and get onto the right track.
That's a really good note to make sure like everybody takes away from this too, is that it's not going to be an immediate result. So what often happens is when we have people send in pictures and they're freaking out about their plant, right? They're like, what is happening to it? They try all the things, but in this case, if you're going to apply a fungicide, for example, you have to give it enough time. Give it like a
Mhm.
little bit of time, see if it works before you try the next thing, because we kind of have to narrow down what's actually going on.
Yeah, for sure. A couple of weeks, I think, is a good rule of thumb,
Okay.
just to try one thing and then try the next thing. But I sort of skipped over drying out the soil. That's your step one. Like, step one is just stop watering it. If you pull the pot off and you see black roots at the bottom, stop watering it for a while. This is probably one of the most common ways that houseplants die at home is because we think that we're helping them out by giving them more water. And then
Hmm.
at the end of the day, it's not what they need. They don't need that. They need a balance of water. They just don't need a ton.
Would you suggest changing the dirt? Like, say you see the bottom is like super, super wet. If you took off that bottom soil and you replaced it, would that help?
Potentially, you're going to get rid of a lot of the root system,
Okay.
which I don't think that plant's already going to be not feeling great. So if you took a bunch of the roots away, it's going to really go into shock.
Okay.
So step one, dry out the soil. Step two, see if you can find some fungicide to apply to it. If you still think you have a chance with the plant, um, I'm not going to recommend any fungicides because we don't have any fungicide sponsors or anything like that. So we're just going to skip on specific recommendations. If you really want a recommendation, let me know. We can do some research and find something on it. Like I was looking around on Amazon.
Okay.
There are some that are out there, but the we're not going to go into anything
No,
specific
go
there.
to your local garden center and ask for their recommendations. Basically, would probably be your best option. So I do have a question though.
Yep.
How long does it take to see? So this bad soil, which if you're listening, this is like the bottom just looks completely black. You can't even see any root systems. Basically, they just gone green or brown. How long does something like that take for a plant to have that happen?
How long? So how long was it sitting in the water?
Yeah,
Like,
so like if you saw this on your plant, would you be like, okay, this has been like this for 2 weeks? Or if you saw this, would it be like that can happen in a couple days?
no, no, it'll happen. I'd say a week or two.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, that's good to know.
somewhere in there where it's just too long. It's been sitting there for too long. It just depends on like which degree, how far it's gone.
It's
Right.
so, yeah, because I'm wondering is it's like, okay, if you made, for example, I'm going to check my root system on my plant every 4 days, that would be okay. It's not like, yeah, you wouldn't want to check it every 2 weeks, which draws me to my next question. How does someone check a root system like this? So I understand taking the pot off and checking the bottom, but let's say we've got like a massive ficus tree. How are we checking the bottom of that root system?
You could still get the pot off but that would require probably some more help. Um, with a larger plant, you're going to have to watch the plant rather than rather than taking the pot off. So you're going to have to water it and see how it's reacting. If it's dropping leaves and you can tell that it's not very happy by, leaves are going brown or it's dropping leaves, it's not having a lot of growth, like new growth coming out, then okay, that's a sign that the plant might need more water.
Okay.
But you're going to have to go case by case basis and really feel your way through. When those plants get bigger, you have to be a little bit more. You have to feel what the plant is looking for at that time.
Okay.
So sometimes you have to watch exactly how it's reacting to the amount of water that you're giving it, and then readjust the watering schedule based on that.
Okay, so what it sounds like to me is like you go through that 7 question checklist. Just FYI for everybody, there we have a checklist. It's called Unhealthy Plants, and it's a resource. You go through all those steps, and all else fails, we're talking probably that he needs like fungicide or something like that
Yeah.
because it could be a disease. Okay, but you've covered all the other things first. You've checked the light, you've checked the pH, and all that stuff.
Yeah,
Okay.
and applying fungicide too can just be a good mitigation.
Okay.
Like it can be, you could do it if you don't think there's any problem. You can apply it. Like a lot of growers will start out a new crop with applying fungicide because they want to make sure that in that soil, right off the bat, as soon as that plant is putting roots through the soil, it's going to be finding the fungicide. It's going to be healthy.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, next up, powdery mildew. Look at that. So we got, if you are listening, these are, it looks like almost frost that's on a leaf and it's spreading. It's white. It will cover the tops, bottoms of the leaves a little bit, and it's a bit of a pain. It's a real pain. So that's what it looks like. Why does it happen? Damp, humid, and the air is not flowing. Those are the three big things. Why does this happen in a greenhouse? If it's humid and the air isn't moving very much. So one thing that in a greenhouse you can run into a problem with is if you are watering or fertilizing and you do that later in the day. And it's, let's say January, February, there's not as much sunlight out there. So you water early in the day and water ends up pooling on the ground. You give the plants a little bit too much and it leaks through the soil and lands on the ground and it's sitting there. And then all of a sudden the vents close, the whole greenhouse shuts down, it gets dark, and there's water all over the cement all night long. That humid, wet environment, that'll eventually start to evaporate, and it can cause this kind of a problem where it's just damp, humid, and if your fans aren't on enough, or you can't push enough air around the greenhouse to really mitigate that, you'll run into this kind of a problem.
So it sounds to me like mold. Like it's like mold.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll happen in your house, right? If it's like your bathroom's humid all the time, you'll kind of like get something moldy or something will go a little gross like that. Okay.
Exactly. There's not enough airflow. There's not enough airflow.
Okay.
So in the greenhouse, how's it treated? Fans, roof vents, and watering at the right time of the day. So in the greenhouse, you want to water earlier in the morning. That's a general rule of thumb, that's when you want to fertilize or water. Roof vents, if you do see that water pooling all over the cement, you'd want to open up the vents. You want to get some fresh air into the greenhouse, really get that air moving. And then fans. Every greenhouse you walk into, it'll have fans on. It'll have fans pushing the air around. You want the air to be circulating and moving all the time. So how do you apply that to your own home? Well, if you can, if you see something like this happening, or even if you want to be preventative, put some fans near your plants to keep the air moving, just to get the air away from your plants. Moving them away from, let's say, the corner of the room into a more well-ventilated, maybe even closer to like a register where the air is going to be moving all the time, that's going to help it avoid this kind of a problem. Moving it to a less damp area, so maybe out of the basement, if the basement is a little bit more wet, and move it to somewhere else in the house that doesn't have as much water sitting around.
Yeah, and I was gonna say like the bathroom, the kitchen. The kitchen gets really hot, so maybe if your plant's doing this, like you got to move it into the living room, somewhere like that. Okay.
And then separating them. So sometimes if you have a whole lot of plants all on, and let's say they're on a shelf and you have a grow light above it, and you see this starting to happen, you're going to want to separate them out, give them all space so that the air can flow in between them. If they're too close and they're all touching together and the leaves are touching each other, that's when you can still have that damp, leaf on leaf sort of situation where they're basically sweating on each other and then
Okay.
causing this kind of a problem to happen.
Okay, like it's like having two people too close together and there's body heat. Like separate the plants, give them more
Yeah.
space. Another thing for fans, first thing that came to mind is getting like a fan that's like sitting on the ground. But ceiling fans will work just as well. Like
Mhm.
if you get your ceiling fan, anything that gets the air moving and circulating through the house. So if you have a ceiling fan in the kitchen and one in the living room, turn those both on, and that'll be usually enough airflow to kind of get everything moving.
I was thinking even of like those little desk fans, like, the
Yeah,
little ones. They're super cheap, pretty small.
yeah.
And if you're concerned about this, set it somewhere near your plants, near your grow lights, and yeah, it'll just push the air around.
It's probably a good sign for you too at home if this is happening, you know that you actually need more airflow in your house to begin with.
Hmm.
So it's probably a good sign for you as well. But okay,
Hmm.
let's move on to the next step.
Okay. Next up is Bothriotis. So what does it look like on this leaf? You see, it's basically like purpley. This looks like it's on a poinsettia leaf. There's a red poinsettia leaf, and then just imagine there's little purple spots that are starting to show on this leaf. It's very common in poinsettias, especially as they get older. Um, this is caused in the greenhouse by high humidity, being crowded, and once again, not enough airflow. So as we go through the next few, you're going to notice that there's a trend in what it's caused by and like why it occurs. Another thing with bothritiس too is this can start to happen with like temperature shocks, specifically in poinsettias. Temperature shocks can cause this to happen if you live in a really cold place and you have your plant in the garden center or in the grocery store and you walk out and you're going to your car and you walk really slowly or something and you leave it in your car takes a long time to get warmed up as you're driving home, and then you get home, you take a long time to get inside the house. That can be enough time for this kind of a disease to start to set in on your plant.
Okay, and like just one for reference as well. It looks like the leaf is rotting actually. One moment, our dog is getting a squeaky toy. Oliver's making his debut here again.
Yeah, if you're listening, he's got the loudest toy imaginable, and he just about grabbed it.
Anyways, yeah, this leaf literally looks like it's rotting. Like if you think of it looks like a tomato going black. That's what this leaf looks like is happening. Just for reference, if you're listening to this. Okay.
Yeah, so it's caused by the same idea, being crowded, high humidity, not enough airflow. So you mitigate it by having roof vents, fans, and in some situations you can spray to help this kind of a problem with certain chemicals. You can remove the damaged leaves, so you can actually send people through to pick off those damaged leaves. That's closer to shipping because it can spread across the plant, but if you take off these leaves, it can help mitigate the problem.
Oh, okay. So this disease is spreadable. Like if it's on one leaf, it can go from that one leaf and start to spread to the others.
Yeah, through the plant, yeah, it
Okay.
can cause that kind of a problem where it keeps flowing through the whole thing.
Okay.
So at home, what do you do? Well, you could probably move the air, like as we were mentioning, keep the air flowing, and you can spray. So when I was looking this up, I was seeing online some people at home have had success with baking soda potassium bicarbonate mix. Now, I'm not suggesting this because I've never tried it specifically. If you're really interested, I can try to find a plant suffering from arthritis and then spray with this.
I think we should do a little science experiment and we should try it.
If you are really interested, send us a message and we can give this a shot and we can look at exactly how this works.
And it is one of the other ways to fix it at home, like remove that leaf. Like I'm just wondering, if I see one of these leaves with this, is the first step maybe get rid of that leaf and then start to move the air and stuff?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, get rid of that leaf and then take the next steps because the plant is telling you something. Hey, I got an issue. I got a problem here. It's trying to tell you something.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
then
great.
take the next steps. Okay, next up, leaf spot. So you can see this here if you are listening, green leaf, but with black and yellow spots all over it, or there's a bit more of a yellowy leaf with some black and white spots on it. And This is mainly caused by having consistently wet conditions, poor air movement, and wet leaves. So in the greenhouse, you can treat it by a fungicide. Once again, moving the air and picking off these leaves. So wet leaves, that can be caused by overhead watering. So if you're watering just from the top down on the plant, this is something we've talked before about different methods of watering and which one is best. Some people say that you have to water from the bottom up. Some people say from the top down is totally fine. If you are watering or fertilizing all over the top of the plant or like using a sprinkler outside, this kind of a situation can happen where the leaf is constantly wet and then it starts to burn on there
I'm
or
picturing, sometimes people spray, like their tropicals as well, they'll like spray
Mhm.
the leaves, so this could be another cause of something like that.
Yeah, if they're constantly and consistently wet, yeah, wet or humid or being misted, as you've just mentioned, that
Hmm.
that can definitely cause this kind of a problem. So in the greenhouse, you can use a fungicide. You can move the air and try to dry out some of the soil. You can pick off those dead leaves or those leaves to try to solve that problem. So at home, pick off the leaves and you can also spray. Now, once again, we're not going to recommend anything specific, but you can find some different sprays online. That kind of a fungicide is going to help you. You really want to just get rid of the wet conditions, dry out the plant completely, dry out the plant top to bottom in the soil a little bit, and then start from the beginning again, start from fresh, move on from there.
So before we move on, I'm gonna take us on a slight tangent because I'm just thinking, sometimes people when they have tropicals, the idea is to have grow lights. You want humid conditions because you're trying to mimic like summer Florida, right, where it's so hot and it's humid, and that's what the plants love. And usually in that condition, there's not much air movement as well because you're thinking, okay, Florida in July, like Fred was in Florida in July and he said he could barely be outside for like 3 minutes. He was like just absolutely dying in this heat. So if you're thinking of that and you're trying to mimic this for your plant, I guess the question is like, why would something like that happen if I'm mimicking what the conditions are when it's grown?
One thing you're missing,
Yep.
the temperature in your home,
Okay. Okay.
right? So it's hot, it's humid, but what we're missing is the hot part. As soon as it gets really warm, most of us turn on the air conditioning, and you have the air conditioning on and it's running. Well, now you have the you have the wet and the humid aspect of Costa Rica or Florida or wherever you're trying to mimic. But if you don't have the high temperatures, it doesn't work. You
Okay.
you have to have that balance. And that's really what these plants, when they're showing these signs of diseases, it means we have an imbalance in what we're being given. We have all of this extra water, and the plant can take on the water. It's made to be rained on, and it can take this kind of a treatment where it's been rained on, the leaves are totally wet, and then it goes through the next day.
Okay.
It can take that, but in the right conditions. It has to have enough sunlight and heat and temperature the next day and overnight in order to really bounce back from that problem.
True. Okay. And I'm also thinking like, okay, let's picture a Florida nursery. It's got the direct sunlight like you talked about, and it's
Hmm.
also going to rain some days, and it's got the perfect airflow. Whereas in a small room in your home, or if it's tucked into the corner in your home, yeah, the airflow is not going to be great.
Hmm.
But it's going to be outside, of course. The airflow is going to be much better if you're doing something like that in Florida. Okay, that's awesome. Thank you.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Um, Last one, number 5. I have anthracnose. So what does it look like? You can see it here. It's got like little brown dots on the leaf, and it looks like almost bugs that have all connected to each other, and then it's sort of begun to spread. Um, on one leaf, it goes from the outside in, and from the other leaf, it goes from the inside out, from the inside of the, like right down the stem of the leaf all the way out.
So I'm gonna just ask a question here. This looks very similar to the last one. So is the differentiator that the last one has black dots and this one is more smaller brown dots all connected?
Yeah, so this is a little bit more connected, as you just mentioned,
Okay.
versus the leaf spot is going to be more blotchy. It's going to be one spot, another spot, and another spot,
Okay.
right? So it's not as it can be in many different places on one leaf.
Okay.
This is going to be attacking all. It's almost like it's moving towards like a cloud.
Okay. And then the image that's just right above us. For reference, if you're listening to this, there's actually like a whole cut out of it almost, like it's rotted out of that leaf. So that's probably something as well you look for with this one.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll start to chew away at those leaves.
Okay.
So why does it happen? Consistently wet conditions and poor air movement. So once again, same situation, same thing. Wet, not enough air movement. What do you do in the greenhouse? You pick off the leaves, you apply some chemical. And that's in addition to what we've said already, where you turn on the fans, open up the roof vents, try to get some more air through the greenhouse. It's a very important part. Fixing it at home. Same situation, same
Wait,
thing.
I'm gonna say.
Yep.
You guys can probably take a guess as to what you're gonna do. You're gonna fix it at home at this point, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the same thing. It's
Yeah.
picking up the leaves, and you can look up some chemical online, move the air. That's really the main point of this. So that's where I wanted to really end this off, is to just say how we water these plants is going to affect what comes next. And it's so important to remember that you can't just go on autopilot. You can't just water from the top down and soak everything all at once. You need to be really attentive to how much water and the way in which you are watering slash fertilizing these plants, because if you're giving it too much, if you're going way overboard, you're going to have these kind of issues. And on the opposite end, if you aren't giving it enough, well, you're going to see the issues with that. They're going to start to drop leaves. They're not going to look right.
Awesome. I was just gonna say some of the key takeaways I'm taking from this, and I'm sure like the audience is listening to this as well. But I just want to kind of slightly recap this. When it comes to any of these diseases that you're seeing in your plant, of course, like try to figure out which one it is that we're talking about. But it seems to be that the common theme is remove that leaf. Like especially if you can find it early enough. Like if you're checking your plants regularly and you see that leaf, get rid of that leaf to begin with. And then apply a chemical. The one chemical you were talking about earlier, but you were saying it's never a bad thing to add that chemical as like just a backup, as a just in case. Do something like that, and make sure that you've got good air quality, and just make sure that you're not overwatering. So just check that root system, and make sure you check that dirt. But it sounds like those are like the four main common treatment steps for something like this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to emphasize that, it's called a fungicide, and really it just tries to get rid of fungus.
Yeah.
Very simple. Just
Okay.
tries to get rid of fungus. So yeah, look up on Amazon or at your local your garden center retailer and see if they have anything that can help you out with that. So from there, that's all I've got for today. That's all we have for today. If you have any questions, head over to plantcare.club and you can ask us there. Until next time, talk to you later.